So you've just signed up for Draft XV, or you're thinking about it, but you've got questions. How do waivers work? Why are players filling their benches with wingers instead of props? And how do I even join a league if my mates aren't into rugby? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. I've pulled together some of the most common questions being raised around Draft XV and questions I've been sent here on the YouTube channel, and I'll be answering them all in this video, along with providing some tips to help you hit the ground running once the season starts. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so the first question I've got here is, what's the difference between Draft XV and the regular salary cap fantasy rugby games? So the salary cap games that you're used to generally give you a set budget, and then you're put up in a massive league with all the other players in the world who are playing that game. Draft is much more personal. You're usually playing in a small private league, usually about 8 to 10 players, and all the available players in the league can be selected only once in the draft. When they've been selected, nobody else can have them, unless you choose to trade them, obviously, with another manager in your league. Draft is just a much more personal and intense fantasy rugby experience. Next question, how does the draft order work, and is it random or customizable? So with Draft XV, the draft order can be set to be completely random, so the draft order is selected once the draft begins, or you can also find a creative way of doing it. You and your mates can select a horse race or an F1 race, have horses or F1 drivers assigned to you, and then depending on the outcome of the race, that sets your draft order. You can put the numbers in a hat and do a live draft video showing the order that players are coming out the hat, or you can even do it in the reverse order of how people ended up in their positions last year. So if you came last in your league, you get first pick, and so on. I quite like using the 100rush.com, which does a random running race between a bunch of pixelated NFL players, and you can even share the race with your mate. So if you're the commish and your team finishes up getting you the first pick, you can show them the race to show that there's no dodgy dealings going on. Next question, can you explain or do a video on the waivers and how to make trades? So the waiver wire is how Draft XV processes trades after the pickups have been locked, and it's really common amongst draft fantasy games. If you played fantasy NFL, you'll know exactly how this works. So pickups are locked after a game week and also during the team announcements, and each manager has a waiver ranking that determines who gets a player if multiple players have tried to pick the same player. So waivers are processed twice a week. The first is on a Tuesday night after the game week's ended, and the second is on a Friday after the team announcements have happened. Picks made after the game week ends or after the first team announcements on a Thursday are all added to your waiver list, and you can change your waiver priority from the teams or players pages and set the order for your picks to be prioritized. So this is really, really important, because if you really want one specific player, you've got to make sure that they're prioritized first in your waiver order. Waivers are then processed in the order of the waiver list. So the first player on the list is the first to be picked. If your pick is successful and nobody else tried to pick the same player, then you will drop to the bottom of the waiver rankings and everybody else will move up. If nobody else goes for the player that you picked, then you'll be awarded the player without changing your waiver rank at all. Waiver rankings are effectively the inverse of the draft pick order at the start of the season. So if you got first pick during the draft, then you're going to be at the bottom of the waiver rankings. And this will carry over each week as the season goes on. Next question, is there a limit to the number of trades you can make? No limit at all. You can trade with all the managers at your league at any time, and you can also do deals with managers with multiple players involved. Just fill your boots. Next question, I was a bit surprised to see that people were filling their benches with outside backs and not replacements for most other positions. Why is that, and what are the advantages and disadvantages? So this is all about the depth of the free agent pool during the season and the value of the players in that position. Outside backs tend to score the highest from a fantasy perspective out of all the positions. They're the ones getting the tries, they're the ones making the meters and beating defenders. And so once all the teams have selected their sides, there tends to be very few high scoring options left in the outside backs in the free agent pool. So the draft is the time to load up on them. On the other hand, there's usually plenty of back row, second row, prop and hooker options left over in the free agent pool after the draft. So don't rush to get loads of backup options in those positions. Next question, how can I join leagues? Can someone play just by joining a random group with other players? I don't have many friends who love rugby as much as I do. Yep, so on the website, you can find all the public leagues by going to the Create Join button on the left menu, click Find a League, go into the Public League section, and then select a league to join from there. Alternatively, the Fantasy Rugby Discord is a great place for people looking for leagues, and then you can stick around to join the brilliant community that we have on there. Next question, what does a typical Friday afternoon selection look like? So on Fridays, all the teams who are playing on Saturday and Sunday will announce their teams midday UK time. And shortly after this, your lineups on DraftXV will show if your players are starting, on the bench, or are out for that match. And from here, you can build your side, then go into the players section to exchange your non-starting players with starting players. You can then put your claims in and wait for waivers to run at 3 PM UK time to see who was successful in receiving those players. After the waivers are run at 3 PM, then it's a simple free-for-all in the free agents as you scramble to pick up any decent players remaining to fill the remaining gaps in your team. So the next question is from John. I recall from Fantasy Rugby Draft that it was impossible to coordinate live drafts with people from all around the world. I typically end up playing with randos from all over as I have no mates. I'm sorry to hear that, John. Is there an automatic draft available too? So yes, there is an automatic draft function. This is where the draft client automatically selects the next highest ranked player in a position that you need from the default rankings. That's the standard approach, but even better is the watch list functionality that DraftXV has, where you can choose the players that you want in the order that you want prior to the draft, so that if you miss a pick or if you can't join the draft, the auto draft will automatically select the next available player on your watch list. Next question, is it worth handcuffing players? So nice bit of fantasy lingo there. Handcuffing players is when you have a player and then you draft their backup as well, so that if the first choice player gets injured or rested, you have an immediate option to come straight into your team. So a good example of this would be picking Marcus Smith and then Jared Evans as well as the backup to Smith at Quins. Personally, fly half is really the only position I'd look to handcuff in DraftXV, as it's such a crucial position and the depth in the fly half position is generally quite low. So next question, what happens with new players who are transferred in after each league has finished its draft? So players added after your draft finishes, or new transfers during the season, or players promoted from the academies into the first team will be added to the game as free agents during the relevant game week pickup lot. Everyone in your league will then be able to bid for them fairly through the waivers process. So that's all the questions. Finally, if you really want to see what to expect on draft day, then check out my video of a live stream of a draft I did a couple of weeks ago, where you'll be able to see a screen share of exactly how the draft works. But hopefully that clears up some of the big questions around DraftXV and gives you a head start in your first season playing the game. If you've got any other questions that I didn't cover, just drop them in the comments to this video and I'll either answer them there or feature them in a future video. And if you found this useful, make sure you give it a like, hit subscribe and share it with your mates who may be new to DraftXV as well. The more players we get into Fantasy Rugby, the better. So good luck with your drafts and I'll see you in the next video.